Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Once upon a time, Ukraine was the jewel of the Soviet defense industry, housing brilliant engineers and the factories that kept the Red Army's missiles flying. In April, Ukraine's brightest minds worked on projects like the solid fuel universal missile, cutting-edge tech in its day. Then the USSR collapsed and Moscow did what it does best. It looted. The schematics, the blueprints, the pride of Ukrainian innovation were carted off to Russia, where they were adapted, stolen and restrained with a new Russian label, to serve Mother Russia's imperial tantrums. Now fast forward to today, and we have the great Oreshnik, Russia's wonder weapon that's supposed to terrify the West. Well, where did it come from? You guessed it, a Ukrainian design. Yeah, the missile now being launched to obliterate Ukrainian cities was born in a Ukrainian factory. Proof that irony doesn't just bite, it explodes.
Сегодня о рисках, связанных с развертыванием США ракет средней дальности в Европе и Азиатско-Тихоокеанском регионе. Мы будем на такие угрозы комплексно реагировать. При этом важнейшая задача – обеспечить своевременное обнаружение старта таких ракет и их перехват. Одновременно нужно отладить все вопросы серийного производства и развертывания подобных ударных отечественных систем, в том числе и гиперзвуковых. Как известно, новейшим мощным оружием России стал ракетный комплекс средней дальности «Орешник». В ноябре, в ответ на удары по территории нашей страны с применением западного оружия, он был успешно использован. Использовались баллистическая ракета в безъядерном гиперзвуковом оснащении. В ближайшее время должен быть обеспечен серийный выпуск таких комплексов для защиты и безопасности России и наших союзников. И это, безусловно, будет сделано.
And it gets better. Ukraine was once a nuclear powerhouse, holding the third largest arsenal in the world. But being the sensible country it is, Kyiv gave up those weapons in exchange for guarantees of security. Russia signed the Budapest Memorandum, promising to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. The UK and the US joined in, because what could possibly go wrong? Surely Russia wouldn't stab anyone in the back, right?
Do you believe that Ukraine should cede territory to Russia?
Well, I'm going to let you know that after I have my first meeting. But a lot of that territory, when you look at what's happened to those, I mean, there are cities that there's not a building standing. It's a demolition site. There's not a building standing. So people can't go back to those cities. There's nothing there. It's just rubble. I don't think they should have allowed missiles to be shot 200 miles into Russia. I think that was a bad thing. And that brought the Koreans in, North Korea, another man I get along with very well. I'm the only one that does. But that did a lot of bad things. I don't think that should have been allowed. Not when there's a possibility. And certainly not just weeks before I take over. Why would they do that without asking me what I thought? I wouldn't have had them do that. I think that was a big mistake they made.
Will you reverse that decision when you're in office? To let those
I might, yeah.
missiles be
I thought it was a very stupid thing to do.
What should Zelensky, if anything, be prepared to give up to end this
He
war?
should be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal.
Now, not only has Russia violated every promise it ever made, but it's also using Ukrainian technology to wage war against the very people who invented it. The Kremlin must be so proud of itself, like a thief bragging about the masterpiece he stole and painted over with a cheap brush. So here we are, Ukrainian cities under fire from a missile that Ukraine accidentally designed. Russia screams about its technological prowess while launching borrowed brains, stolen documents, and decades-old Soviet scraps. As for Ukraine, well, it's building its own weapon, now faster, smarter, and far more innovative. And if Moscow should remember that you can't steal plans, but you can steal resilience. Russia, ever the drama queen of global politics, this time their defense minister, Belarusov, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, has declared that Russia must prepare for a full-scale war with NATO within the next 10 years. That's right, folks. Moscow has consulted its crystal ball and determined that World War III is inevitable. Forget diplomacy or fixing their crumbling economy. War prep is far more exciting.
В условиях деятельность Министерства обороны строится с учетом следующих ключевых факторов. Во-первых, это ведение активных боевых действий в ходе специальной военной операции, а также выполнение отдельных задач и обеспечение военного присутствия в странах Центральной Азии, Африки, на Кавказе и в Приднестровье. Во-вторых, это обеспечение полной готовности к любому развитию обстановки в среднесрочной перспективе, включая возможный военный конфликт с НАТО в Европе в ближайшие десятилетия. Об этом говорят решения, которые были приняты на прошедшем в июле текущего года саммите Североатлантического альянса. Также это находит отражение в доктринальных документах США и других стран НАТО.
And what exactly does ready for war look like in Russia these days? Perhaps it's dusting off World War II era tanks they dug out of museums, or maybe it's frantically scouring North Korea for cheap labor and outdated ammunition. Meanwhile, their soldiers are still equipped with rusty rifles and boots that barely survive a rainy day, let alone combat. But who needs functioning equipment when you've got Oreshnik, the magical weapon Putin's propagandists swear will strike terror into NATO? Of course, while Belarusov thumbs his chest about war with the West, the Russian people can't afford butter, sugar, or heating. Schools are falling apart, hospitals lack basic supplies, and the ruble is worth less than a supermarket coupon. But hey, who cares when you're gearing up for a global showdown? The irony is staggering. Russia, a country plagued by corruption, where billions vanish into oligarch pockets, genuinely believe it's ready to take on the collective military might of NATO. If the West doesn't laugh them off the battlefield, Russia's own infrastructure might just collapse under its own weight first. So, sleep tight, Europe. Putin's generals are polishing their threads and sharpening their rhetoric. Just don't look too closely behind the curtain. You might catch a glimpse of a crumbling nation desperately trying to place superpower on a shoestring budget. Russia, where fallen dictators go to retire and stolen money goes to find a new home. Enter Bashar al-Assad, the butcher of Syria, now proudly declaring that he never planned to leave his country. Of course not. He simply decided that a quick jaunt to Moscow was in order, dragging his bag stuffed with 500-euro notes and crisp $100 bills like any other vacationer fleeing a collapsing regime. Let's not forget, this is the man who ruled over Syria with an iron fist, turned cities into rubble, and still found the time to send 2 tons of cash to his Russian friends between 2018 and 2019. That's $250 million in loose change, all coincidentally timed with the Assad family's Moscow shopping spree. Luxury apartments? Check. Lavish mansion? Check. All paid for in good old-fashioned corruption cash. After all, nothing says thank you for saving my regime like a penthouse in the Russian capital. And Russia, ever the gracious host, happily rolled out the red carpet for their belligerent guest. The irony? While Putin's propagandists tell ordinary Russians to tighten their belts and eat potatoes in the name of geopolitical sovereignty, the Kremlin is busy housing foreign kleptocrats and laundering their blood money. And meanwhile, poor Vladimir Putin must be scratching his head. He spends billions bombing hospitals and schools to prop up Assad, only to have the guy arrive in Moscow with suitcases of loot instead of victory speeches. Oh, the price of loyalty. At this rate, the Kremlin may need to set up a separate wing for ex-dictators turned luxury tenants, the Despot Suite, coming soon to central Moscow. So, dear Russians, next time you see your roads full of potholes and your ruble pummeling, just remember your hard-earned cash was swapped for Assad's shiny euros, now funding his happy exile while you're left holding the empty sack. Bravo, Putin, another masterful alliance. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.